So the Comics Code called up Bill Gaines and said, you know, you can't have this guy be a Negro. Why not? Well, it'll offend people in the South. And Bill Gaines, and I tell you, it's great. Bill Gaines said, you know what? Fuck you! And he hung up. And so you know what he did? He quit the comics business. And he'd been making this comic called called Mad. So after the third comic, he went, you know what? Fuck them. I'm not in the comic business. It's now Mad Magazine. And the rest is history. So I want to do a movie about him, and in the movie we tell about 8 different stories from the different comics, and we do them in 6 different kinds. Some of them are live action, some of them are stop motion, some of them are CG, and some of them are traditional hand animation. It's very cool. And of course, every studio said, you know, we'd love to see this movie, but we don't have a clue how to sell it. Get George Clooney to play. If you get Brad Pitt to play, we could. This has been the story of my career. I've made so many movies that they would not make now. I was, you know, I wrote Animal House. I'm sorry, wrong, I did not. I wrote An American Werewolf in London in 1969, and I made it in 1981. Same movie, it was just that I had made some hits by then. So it's tough out there. Anything else?
I had a question.
Yes.
What were some of the, I mean, you've been doing films for, I don't know, how many decades?
47 or 48 years.
48 years.
No, what are you nuts about? Jeez.
What were some of the difficulties that you faced?
So depressed now.
Versus, you know, like content, you know, as opposed to the way you can get away with now, as opposed to what you can get
Well,
away
it
with
changes.
back in the day.
One of the great things about censorship is that it's completely irrational. Because censorship is based on contemporary morals. Well, for instance, all the Hammer films, when they came out in the 60s, 50s and 60s in the US, were rated G. In England, they were rated X, the same movies. Because then, it was like in the States, we don't care about violence. I mean, you know, you remember the famous Jack Nicholson, do you know that quote? Jack Nicholson had a quote 20 years ago about the rating system. If you kiss a bare breast or suck on a bare breast, it's X. If you fondle a bare breast, it's R. If you cut a bare breast off, it's G. He was just, you know, because violence, I mean, you can have incredible violence in movies, get away with it, but if you have sex and or violence, it becomes weird. And the truth, I support the ratings system, I really do, and I've had my own problems with them over the years, but it's the only way you can avert the crazies out there. We're a Christian country, and you know, we're full of crazy Christians, and it's a problem.
What is, I mean, besides the fact that it is a digital age, and that the industry maybe doesn't know how to wrangle digital downloading and that stuff, what are some of the other problems that hinder the industry these days from making good films?
Well, okay, it's about money. It's always been called the motion picture business, the industry, show business. I mean, it's about making money. So therefore, okay. I won't go through the whole history I can tell you here, but you know how everyone said in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, how the studios owned the theaters? Yeah, that's not true. The theaters owned the studios. Lowe's Inc. owned MGM. Paramount Theaters owned Paramount. Fox. Skuros owned 20th Century Fox. It was, see, everyone has that backwards. But with the Antitrust Act, they had to divorce. They had to be separate businesses. So there was a balance of power. You remember, some of you are old enough to remember when a movie came out, it would come out in the good theater downtown or wherever, and then after a while, it would open and go wide, they called it, where it went to neighborhood theaters, and then it would go to drive-ins, and then it would... Roadshow. What? Roadshow. Roadshows were cool. And that was big movies like Ben-Hur, reserved seats, that was very cool. But now the model's completely changed. Like a movie like Animal House opened in about 600 theaters, and the reaction was so fantastic that the word of mouth is what sold that picture. People said, I saw this movie, you gotta go see it. So Animal House did better the second weekend than it did the first, better the third weekend than it did the second, and best the fourth weekend. It was out a month when it made its most money, because it kept more and more theaters, more and more people, became a big hit. Now, everything's different. Making movies is not that expensive. You know when they say it's so expensive? No, it's not. The cost of making movies is like making houses, just gone up. It's the cost of selling movies, marketing. Because if you don't know about it, you don't go see it, right? So they have to market it. Now movies open in sometimes 9,000, 10,000 theaters at the same time. Why is that, you know?
Money.
Bootleg.
But why? Piracy. Piracy and the fact that if you're spending advertising dollars, you have to reach the most people you can. Well, the networks have fallen apart. With cable TV, when Johnny Carson was on, before cable, 35 to 40% of the country watched him every night. So you put a commercial on Johnny Carson, you knew that at least 35% of the entire American public saw that commercial. Now, do you know what a big network audience is? 20 million, as opposed to 300 million. You know, it's like everything's changed because of this cable, everything's splintered. Also, I bet a lot of you guys don't watch TV. Like my son, he watches TV on his computer. On the internet, yeah. So everything's changing. And until they get a handle on it, it's difficult. But the real truth is, there are no studios owned by filmmakers anymore. When Lou Wasserman was the last holdout, when he sold MCA, Universal, to the Japanese, to the Japanese originally, that was the end. Columbia went to Coke, it was the end. And now, Paramount is this much of Gulf and Western. Sony, Columbia Pictures, is this much of Sony. General Electric, which makes submarines and light bulbs, you know. These are huge multinational corporations. Do you know how much NBC Universal is? I think it's less than 1% of the gross of General Electric. They're hemorrhaging money now, you know, so get rid of it. Comcast is threatening to buy it. It's a very unstable time, so no one will take risk. There's nobody with balls in those executive offices because they're all corporate. And corporate immediately means what's your major, in a corporate job, what's your number one responsibility?
Stockholders.
Keeping your fucking job. So do you take risk? No. You know. Yeah.
So Landis, what is the difference between, because I know you've had large budgets and you've had...
There's no difference.
No.
I'll tell you, honestly, this is something that makes me crazy because I've worked on a lot of movies. I was crew on a lot of pictures in Europe and in the States, and about 140 before I made my own.
Weren't you you were a mechanic in Death Race 2000, weren't you?
Actually, yeah, I was a stunt player, but Paul Bartel gave me a line.
Kelly's hero.
Then Sylvester Stallone kills me. I remember my line. So I wonder if he got points for that eye. That was my line. And Stallone kills me. But anyway, my point is that the cost of emotion, well, this is a whole other subject for this. You know how people go, he's a comedy director, he's a horror director, John Ford makes Westerns. That always pisses me off because if you're a filmmaker, it's telling stories through the juxtaposition of images. So what is the fucking difference between any of those genres? Truthfully, well, you're applauding, but prevailing wisdom is there is a difference. So for instance, for me, I've made very successful comedies, horror films, and musicals. So what am I offered? Comedies, horror films, and musicals. And because I've worked a lot with African Americans, they go, hey, we have black people singing. That's called Landis, you know. No, it's true, it's absolutely true. So what happens that's so weird is that you get typed. You know how actors get typed? Okay, well, directors get typed too, and it's very unfortunate. And there's two ways of typing. One is he does big pictures, he does little pictures. The director's job, if it's Ben-Hur or Blair Witch, is exactly the same job. Put the camera there, you guys do this. What's the difference? It's put the camera there, you 10,000 guys do this. I've made huge movies and little movies, the job is exactly the same. And whether you're making a comedy or a dance movie or a Western, the job's the same. However, some filmmakers knew early on about branding. So Alfred Hitchcock was very clever. Alfred Hitchcock presents The Master of Suspense. He knew if Hitchcock made a comedy, he did. Called The Trouble with Harry. Everyone went, what the hell is this? And they didn't go because it wasn't suspenseful. So he became a trademark. John Carpenter, Toby Hooper, they become trademarks. This is what we do, we make corporate. Well, I hate that shit, you know? I like every movie, and I like to make any kind of movie. I'm frustrated that Three Amigos is my only Western. I love Westerns.